Okay, so today we're going to discuss, I think, the results of a Vanson Bourne survey, which was carried out on behalf of yourselves, Fivetran, and it was looking at AI usage. I suppose the positive discovery was the vast majority of people do recognize AI as being important to their business. I mean, if I can just set the flip side, that was unfortunately a similarly high percentage are a little bit skeptical or even don't trust AI. So can you just sort of explain that? I won't say it's an apparent contradiction, but why the two things coexist?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We did commission this survey because we'd heard that apparently the window of using AI for competitive advantage was closing. So companies in one way feel under pressure to really leverage AI as a competitive advantage, but AI is not that easy to do. And so while, as you say, 87% of organizations say it's a really important part of their strategy, 90% also say that they feel that they, spend a huge amount of time on a lot of manual effort that goes into AI, and that they don't feel that they are, let's say, mature in their AI usage.
Okay, and the result of that is that companies, whereas as you say, AI, you said the window for competitive advantage may be closed, but clearly people recognize AI gives many benefits. But unfortunately, a lot of organizations are therefore still relying on manual processes, which either take a lot of time or in certain cases, I guess, just can't do the same as what AI can do. Is that right?
That's right. And I know I'm kind of throwing a lot of stats and numbers out here, but 86% of the respondents of the survey, they said that they don't fully trust the results that they are seeing from their AI, because they don't really believe that the underlying data is giving them the accurate results. So there's that kind of lack of trust, I would say, which comes from the fact that they just don't have the right data sets, be it because they can't leverage them, or they can't even access them in the first place. So obviously, Fivetran being a company that specializes in data pipelines, right? That's what we do. We bring data into a centralized location. We believe that data should be as reliable and simple as electricity. That's our mission. So we find this particularly interesting because we know that if we can help companies just bring all of the data that they need into one location, and then they can do their AI modeling on top of that, then that's going to increase their results and also their trust in the AI. So that's why we find it interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, in simple terms, there are more and more things with the amount of data that if you don't use AI, you just wouldn't be able to afford the number of humans you'd have to throw at a data set to get any meaningful results. So companies are, as you say, back to this competitive, if they're not doing it, they are missing out on potentially some massive benefits. Is that right?
Yeah, and one thing is the cost of the humans. Another thing is just the more manual effort that you have in there. Of course, the longer it's going to take, and data loses value over time. The older the data is, the less valuable it is. And so, it's not just about the cost of the humans that you are paying to do this, but it's, every minute that passes where you're doing manual processing, the value of your data goes down. I see it a little bit as well as kind of, imagine if you're like a data engineer is like a chef, right? They are responsible for doing magic with data, just like chefs are responsible for doing magic with ingredients. And you can imagine then if you as a chef, you're supposed to be cooking this wonderful meal, and then you actually end up spending 90% of your time going out finding ingredients. That's not really what chefs like doing, although, some are really interested in going to the market as well and finding their ingredients. But, spending most of their time in a forest foraging for mushrooms, that's probably not what the chefs would like to do with their time. Similar with the data engineers, they want to spend their time doing the magic with the data, not actually, doing the manual processing of, finding and accessing the data.
So the landscape, in simple terms, there is very immature when it comes to AI use. And if people are using it, is it right to say that they are using it in, I don't know, sort of what we might call generalist type applications, as opposed to very much specialized, where potentially the real, the big benefits arise? Is that a fair characterization of the situation?
Well, you have a few different use cases. Obviously, AI being a relatively big investment by companies. And by the way, today the companies that we surveyed spend about 7% of their annual revenue on investing into AI. And they plan over the next 3 years to increase it to 13% of their annual revenue. Like, that is a significant investment. And so they want to spend that on the areas where it's going to have the biggest impact on either their top line or their bottom line. And so we see some companies that are using it, on that kind of, the marketing and customer and revenue generation side of things. And then there are also companies that leverage a lot of AI more in the underlying processes, big like supply chain optimization, manufacturing optimization, where it can really help. And actually, quite interestingly, now obviously with our awareness on the environment and trying to be more carbon neutral, a lot of companies are investing in AI to become much more efficient in how they leverage a lot of their resources. So it's part of becoming a carbon neutral company.
Okay, and in terms of where AI produces the best value, I imagine to a certain extent it varies from company to company, but as you say, is it the customer facing type stuff, or is it the operational inside an organization where they can improve their, their internal IT infrastructure, optimize that, etc., or does it really just vary from the type of organization you are?
It is a little bit of everything. It really comes down to whatever their competitive advantage is. We have actually one company or a customer in the US, which is quite interesting. They are a hospital chain, right, or a group of hospitals and clinics. And they are bringing all of the kind of patient data together in one location and starting to put AI on top of it so that they can get much better at diagnosing illnesses early on, and sometimes even before, symptoms appear in their patients. So that AI and machine learning that they are applying is going to, one, it's good for their business, but secondly, it is incredibly important for people who then, may be developing illnesses that they're not aware of yet, that can get caught quickly so that they are much more likely to survive and also less likely to have to go through lengthy and painful procedures in terms of saving their lives.
And in terms of, you say the landscape is generally improving, that people are wanting to invest and according to the survey, planning to invest more in AI. But even once they've made that commitment to AI, the raw ingredients, if you like, you've mentioned earlier, I think, yourselves, the data pipeline, that's the critical part of it. And that's one of the major obstacles. So even when I say, it's one thing to not invest in AI, but then even when you just say, yep, we're going to invest in AI, but how do we assemble, if you like, the raw data on which, the AI will then, work its magic? That whole sort of data supply chain from raw data through to turning data into meaningful information to make decisions on. What are you seeing there, and how can that, situation be improved?
Yeah, so we are seeing, let me maybe give another example, right? So as companies start to capture much more data, and they capture data through different sources, they're really spending, let me put it this way, some of the use cases that we have, or some of the companies that we talk to, they are leveraging a lot of AI to better understand their users and their customers, so that they can understand kind of risk of churning or downgrading, but also understand opportunities for growing customers. And so they are now starting to combine, say for instance, you're a software company, right? You then want to take your CRM data and take all your customer data, put it into one place, combine that with the usage data of how your customers are using your software, so that you can start, putting some models on top to understand, is this usage going to indicate that they are about to churn? Is the usage indicating that they are potentially, open to leverage more of our software capabilities and solutions? And then they want to put that back into the CRM and other tools that their customer-facing teams are using, so that they can then proactively reach out to the customers. And they can even put that into their product-led growth engine, where they can put in product triggers that will help the customers and their users go into, say, capabilities of the solution that is available to them, but that they're currently not using. So that's really a lot of kind of what they are doing now. But CRM data is one thing. Then there's the billing data sitting in the ERP. There's the product data sitting in whatever whatever database it is that they have underlying their product, and you can combine it with loads of other data sources as well. And so as they're looking at this, they want to get the data from all of these sources, and it's becoming more and more sources as we get really capable of capturing more and more data. But then you have the challenge of, how can I bring it all into one location, and how can I bring it into a location using the same schema, so that I can attach this data together and run these AI models on top. You can imagine a customer, a user, may have one identifier in your CRM, and it might have a completely different identifier in your actual software product. So how can you tie those two together, so that you understand that Guro Bergan is in the CRM is the same as Guro.Bergan in the product, for instance?
Okay, so does that mean, I don't know if the survey uncovered it, or more anecdotally, does that mean a majority of organizations are still then relying on much sort of manual? I know obviously AI is, makes a lot of automated, but still then presents information, I guess, on which humans potentially do make the ultimate decision. But I guess what I'm saying is, without AI, you're making much more of the decisions, a human just a sort of, finger in the air, we think customers want to do this or whatever. Is that still, regrettably what's happening in a lot of organizations? They're relying on their experience and knowledge, as opposed to the truth behind the data.
That's 100% correct, right? We, because of that lack of trust in the AI models, which comes from the lack of trust in the underlying data, it does mean that overall the human-led decision-making is still the biggest type of decision-making. So through the survey, we discovered that 71% of the companies were, or their decisions were relying on human-led decision-making. And in fact, the UK was the worst in this. In the UK, it was 77% of decisions were made by humans as opposed to by technology. And so that's really what all of us and all of the companies are trying to get to, is where they can rely more on the technology-led decision-making as opposed to the human-led decision-making.
Okay, so there's a big room for improvement when it comes to AI projects. And we mentioned the data, a lot of things. Are there any other things that people need to be aware of as they, assemble AI projects? Data is critically important, but are there other things that need to go along with that?
Yeah, I think there's basically two main things. One is just, as you're looking at this, one is accessing the data, but accessing it in as close as possible to real time. So I mentioned earlier that data loses value over time. And so, as they're looking at how quickly can we get the data, the timing becomes incredibly important, right? Think about just even marketing use cases where you're running a marketing campaign, it's Black Friday, You need to understand, in this minute or in the next 5 minutes, how each campaign is doing so that you can adjust. It doesn't really help you if you find out a week later how the campaigns are doing. That might help you for next Black Friday, but at that point, it's going to be too late. So one factor is just the timing of the data that you're accessing. And then the second thing is around the talent. And I talked about this with the chefs. The reality is we don't have enough data scientists in the world. So every company that is looking to invest in AI, and they are increasing the level of willingness to invest in AI, they are going to have to hire people. And so, you want to make the most out of the people and the talent that you have in your organization. And so, really trying to automate as much as possible so that the data scientists can do what is the most valuable to you as a company, but it's also what they actually want to do. So you're more likely to keep them within your organization, keep the talent, if you allow them to do what they would like to do, as opposed to spending 90% of their time, getting the data even together so that they can do the things they love.
Okay, and in terms of Fivetran, I mean, you alluded earlier, referenced the data pipeline stuff. What is it exactly that you can do to help this process when customers are committed to AI? And where do you fit in to help them, optimize an AI project or make it work well?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, right, we believe that data should be as simple and reliable as electricity. That is our mission. And so what we do, and I know this sounds really basic, but it's really important, and it's not easy to do, which is why 90% of the time goes into it. But what we do is we have data connectors that connect into all of the main applications as well as databases that exist. And then also into a data warehouse or a data lake or a lake house, whatever it is that you're choosing as a company to use. So what we do is we connect all of these sources of data into the data warehouse, and then we also provide some schema changes as part of that so that you can start stitching the data together. So that's really the core essence of what we do. It sounds very simple. We move data from one place to another, but actually getting it done in such an easy to use fashion is quite complicated. We have over 200 different connectors, and we work closely with all of the main SaaS players that we connect with to make sure that when they make changes to their code, when they make changes to their APIs, which they do very often, then we are aware of it beforehand so that we can make sure that when those changes come in, it doesn't break the connection. Whereas, companies that are doing these connections or connectors themselves and building more manual pipelines, let's say they're connecting into Salesforce. Well, Salesforce makes, I think, 50,000 code changes every year or something. You can imagine each and every one of those has the potential to break something. Right. So we work with Salesforce proactively to know what they are changing and when. All of these companies out there, they can't, connect in with Salesforce to understand this proactively all the time. And that's, by the way, only one of the connectors, right, that they need and that we have. So we just, make it really reliable. Our reliability is 99.9%. And that way, there's always that data flowing through, which they then need to sit on the other side in that data warehouse or data lakehouse and use all of their AI models that sit on top.
Okay, and in terms of noticing, reference back to the survey and what's going on, are you seeing that in real time in the company? So people are beginning to, whether it's your sales or just your customer base, whatever, you're seeing significant growth as more organizations are switching on to what AI can do for them.
Yeah, we are seeing a significant growth in the demand for this. And what I would also say is, the companies are they have been for a long time interested in the actual data. They're also interested in kind of the metadata behind there. and this is where we just did a launch of what we're calling the metadata API, where the users of the data can get access to all of this metadata behind it, which, by the way, is a lot more secure as well. You may have users that you don't necessarily want to give access to all of the PII data, for instance, that is available. So this is the personal data. But they can do an awful lot with the metadata and the data modeling on the back end. And so by leveraging this metadata API, they can still access all of that without necessarily having access to the sensitive data in the actual database. And I just want to mention as well, another thing that we have done is we last year we acquired a company called HBR, and so we have now incorporated HBR into our solution set. And HBR is really good at really kind of looking into the more complicated, maybe a little bit more legacy databases. So we're now able to match customers that are maybe going through a modernization journey, where they have some of the more modern SaaS applications, but they also have some older legacy databases or applications, be it SAP or Oracle or whatever. And we can now help them on that modernization journey based on where they are today and also where they're going to go in the future.
Okay, so in terms of drawing a couple of conclusions, people are aware of what AI can do for them, and whether it's people starting out on their journey or maybe who have started and aren't perhaps finding it's as rewarding or giving them the benefits they thought. Are there one or two sort of key bits of advice you'd give to people in terms of how to go about an AI implementation? What the do's and don'ts, just how to get the most out of it?
The do's and don'ts, I would say the do's is, first of all, make sure that you actually have the underlying data available for the AI. In fact, I'm currently in Munich. I've been going around on a little roadshow here in Germany with my team. And I was in Berlin a couple of nights ago, and I was talking to a person there who's not using Fivetran yet, but he was talking. He sits in an AI team, and what they're struggling with is actually getting enough data to start modeling their AI. So his issue isn't the AI models; it's actually just getting enough data that they can start putting it on top of. And so my kind of number one do, I suppose, is make sure that you get access to the data, first of all, before you start investing a ton into building AI models, because the foundation is going to determine how good the house will be in the end.
Okay, and when you say getting access, you mean, in his case and most others, it's not the fact that the data doesn't exist, it's just, as you say, how you can get hold of it and then bring it into one place to then run the model to come up with information to make decisions. Is that right?
That's right. I'm sure there will be more data that will exist in the future, and that is also part of what companies are looking at is ensuring that they can get that they will generate all of the data. But there's so much data at this point. Companies have become very good at generating the data, but they don't necessarily know how to capture it and then how to get value out of it afterwards.
Okay, it's been great to chat to you. So thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you.
Likewise, really enjoyed it.